When I turned 20, I decided to move out of my parents' house and get a house of my own. The house was pretty old, and the doors kinda sucked since they couldn't close. If you tried to close it, it would just open again by itself. So about 6 months into living there, I noticed that I must have been eating a lot, since whenever I woke up and checked the fridge, a lot of the food I saw the day before would be gone. That made me feel obligated to go to the gym, since I felt like I would get fat if I kept eating that much. Since the house was old, I would hear some clicking noises from the walls, which for some reason didn't let me sleep. Usually, before I go to sleep, I pick up something like a book bag or a chair and put it in front of my door so that the door will stay shut, since the void of what's outside of my room just didn't let me sleep. So I decided to get new doorknobs so that the doors would actually stay shut when I closed them. The process included the doorknobs to be taken off for about a day since the doors were so old. The company that was fixing the place needed extra equipment since the locking mechanism was different from modern day doors. So the entire day was just me on my computer with no doorknob on my door. I mean, the doors never really closed anyway. So that night, I decided to sleep early, like at 8 p.m. That made me wake up at like 5 a.m. I woke up and heard something that kind of sounded like a loud draft coming from the other side of my bed. The more I listened to it, the more it sounded like breathing. Most people would have probably played it off as my mind's playing tricks on me, but no. I knew that I was hearing 100% breathing that was not mine. My heart was racing, thinking that someone was looking over me at the other side of my bed. I decided to turn around. I saw nothing. I scanned my room for any signs of someone who's in my room, like dressers being opened that weren't there before. No, I saw nothing. That sound of breathing, though, I still heard it. Then I finally found the source, my door. Then I decided to look at the doorknob hole that was there. The more I looked at it, the more I saw an iris and a pupil. Someone was there, and they were watching me. I slightly closed my eyes to the point only my eyelashes covered them, and pretended to sleep. Seconds felt like hours as I awaited the moment that creep decided to leave. Finally, at around sunrise, they decided it was time to leave. I heard my attic door open, then close. I was paralyzed on my bed, not wanting to get up. Eventually, I got up and immediately dialed 911. After like 10 minutes, they arrived. I told them to check the attic, but no one was there. All they saw was a beat-up looking mattress and the window being wide open. Seems like whoever was there left. But every night I wonder if they will come back, and if they'll actually go inside my room if they come back. This is a weird and creepy story from my childhood. I live in Alabama, so there's plenty of woods in my street. My grandparents live on the hill above my house, with woods behind their house. Me and my sister decided to make a fort in the woods behind their house when we were young. We thought it was fun to pretend to be an actual house, so we bought a bunch of household items, including toilet paper, to put in our fort. This is where it gets creepy. When we returned to our fort one day, we found where someone had used one of our toilet paper that we left to wipe themselves and cover their poop with outside of the fort. We still have no idea who could have done this, and it still weirds us out. My mom wouldn't let us go back to the fort after that. I like Snapchat. I mean, who doesn't? It's everyone's thing nowadays. I was on Snapchat looking at filters when I came across one with no title. As you may have guessed, this immediately got my attention. I clicked the filter, and I would say it took about a good solid minute to load. But that's beside the point. The filter was a nugget face tracker thing. Everything seemed pure and innocent. I was joking around sending videos and photos when I saw a glitchy message come up on my screen that said, "Life's a simulation." I got so scared I didn't go on Snapchat for a week. One night, me and my friend decided to go to the movies. It was actually the last movie that night, so it got pretty late when the movie ended. My friend was staying close to the mall we went to, so I decided to crash at her place that night. On the way back, we stopped for a cigarette since it was summer, so it was still very warm outside. Of course, it wasn't crawling with people on the street since it was like 1 a.m. But we were close to the subway and had a shop that was a non-stop. So we were sitting on a bench talking at the crossroad when we saw this man on his bike. He was dressed in all black. I mean all. He had black gloves, a black tracksuit, and the most disturbing, he had a bike mask also black. So basically we could only see his eyes. My friend starts joking of how creepy it would be if he stops right in front of us. I brush it off, and then he cycles right past us and gives us the most awful look ever. He couldn't stop staring while turning his lights off. Safe to say that we were pretty spooked. But then again, he didn't stop, so we were fine. But then, we both had this feeling right after it happened to look for him, and we see him turning around and coming straight to us. I felt a chill down my spine, and I realized my friend was scared too, because she took my hand and said, "Let's get out of here right now." So we went to that store since no one was around, and we stayed for like 10 minutes. We actually bought a deodorant as protection, which sounds hilarious right now, but it sounded like a good idea then. Now we had to go home, and that meant that we had to pass the exact same spot where we first saw him. But we thought that maybe he was gone. So we returned, and there he was, sitting on the same bench. He hadn't taken his mask off. As I told you, it was very hot outside, even for a night, and there was no wind either, so I found it very weird for him not to do this in 15 plus minutes. After giving us another chilly look, we left in the opposite direction, taking another route to her place, all the way checking behind us because it was already 2 a.m. We finally arrived at her place safely. Now I know that bikers usually wear those masks. I've seen it before, but I've also seen how they take it off after they stop, and there was something about this man, the way he looked at us, the chill we both felt, and the fact that he turned around after passing us. So this is a true story about something that happened to me about 4 years ago. At the time, it completely freaked me out. I used to tell people about it, but nobody ever really believed me, so I just stopped telling the story, because I know exactly what I saw, and I got sick of people telling me I was wrong. So my Nan lives in a fairly secluded area. At the back of her house, there's a big garden with a big pond, greenhouses, and fruit trees. Just over halfway up the grass, there are 2 flower arches, surrounded by bushes, which lead to the back of the garden, where there is a wooden summer house against the fence, and 2 large patches of soil either side, which make up the back corners of the garden and the fence. One night, at around 9 p.m., I had a phone call from one of my closest friends. It seemed important, so I decided to leave the house. I took the call in the summer house at the back of my Nan's garden. It was during the winter, so it was pitch black in the secluded garden by 9 p.m. I'd been on the phone for about 15 minutes, chatting away, when I heard my little sister knocking at the door of the summer house. My sister was about 12 at the time. She was a very confident and mischievous character, and was often noisy when I was talking to my friends. So I just called out and told her to go away, then carried on chatting. About 3 minutes later, I started hearing more knocking, but this time it was much louder, and along the front of the wooden wall as well as the door. My sister knows I don't like the dark, and that I'm a scaredy cat, so I thought she was trying to creep me out. I shouted loudly at her to go away, and that I was trying to have a conversation. I apologized to my friend for my sister's behavior, and continued the conversation. Less than 2 minutes later, more knocking. This time it was accompanied by a strange scratching sound, like she was dragging her nails, or maybe a stick, along the wooden walls of the summer house. At this point, I was annoyed. I was trying to have a serious conversation, and this was the 3rd time my sister had done this. It was so aggravating, but honestly, it was also kind of spooky because I knew I was out in the dark. Even though I knew it was my sister, I was strangely on edge. I once again apologized to my friend, and took him with me on the phone, outside, to confront her. I swung open the door, and stepped into the pitch-black garden. I saw my sister run around the side of the summer house, and into the corner of the fence on the soil. It was so dark I could only just about make out her shadowy silhouette, but I could see that she was crouched down in the corner with her hands up over her face. I shouted to her, "Holly, there's no point in hiding, I can see you." With this, she stood up and walked along the fence until she was right next to the summer house. I shouted out to her again, "Holly, stop being silly. You know I don't like the dark and it's freezing cold." Then I started apologizing on the phone to my friend again. But with that, her silhouette just disappeared. Gone. I stopped mid-sentence on the phone, and I stood there for a few seconds, completely bewildered. My body seized up. I couldn't understand what had just happened. After a few moments, I had got myself together. I put my phone on loudspeaker and turned on its flashlight. I directed it at the fence. There was nothing, and nobody there. Who or what have I been calling out to? I turned around, bolted it back down the garden and to the house. I ran as fast as I possibly could and was on the verge of tears. I started muttering something to my friend on the phone and tore into the house through the kitchen door. My mom was stood in the kitchen and asked me what was wrong with me. I was stood there shaking, tears in my eyes, completely out of breath. All I said was, "Where's Holly?" But before she could answer, I frantically ran off in the house searching for her. I quickly found her in the spare bedroom which we shared when we both stayed around. She was lying on one of the beds, tucked under the duvet, with her headphones in. She was watching something on her tablet. My blood ran cold. Tears started creeping out of my eyes. I asked her if she'd been in the garden. She said she'd been in bed watching a movie on her tablet for at least half an hour. I knew when my sister was lying, and she could clearly see I was distraught and actually looked quite concerned. And even if I didn't believe her, there's no way she would have got back down the huge garden and into the house without me realizing. I left the room and told my friend who had been on the phone the whole time what had just happened. He was nearly freaked out his eye because he had heard the knocking as well as me. I tried to tell my mom what had happened. She nodded, but I knew she didn't believe me. I then told my sister, who was a bit more convinced, but she thought I was just trying to scare her. I was in such a panic and I was so frustrated nobody believed what happened. To this day, the only person who has ever believed me is the friend I was talking on the phone to. He heard everything from the noises on the door to me running down the garden, to the panic in my voice when I found my sister inside. It still keeps me up at night sometimes. Even now, I always wonder, what happened that night in the darkness? What had I heard? Who was I shouting at the whole time? And what silhouette did I see in the corner of the garden? Was it my granddad who had died in the house a few months earlier? Or was it something very, very different? I don't think I'll ever know the answers. But what I do know is that it's the scariest thing I've ever experienced and will be etched into my brain forever. Every detail of it. The noises, the silhouette, the way my heart pounded, the way my limbs shook, burned into my memory for good.